This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/macvoices. And by TunnelBear, the really simple app to privately browse and get around block websites. To find out more and download your own TunnelBear, visit tunnelbear.com/macvoices. Welcome back to Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this time we get to talk about one of my favorite audio utilities and the guy that wrote the book on it, literally. I'm talking about, of course, Audio Hijack from Rogue Amoeba. And the book is Take Control of Audio Hijack, and the author is Mr. Kirk McElhearn. Kirk, it's great to have you back. Thanks for being here once again.
Hi, Chuck. It seems like we were just talking last week.
I don't think it was last week, but it's not long ago.
It was about a month ago.
Yeah. You're just cranking out the books and articles.
This is a coincidence. It really is. This book had been planned for a while, and the iTunes book, which we discussed last time, that was an update based on Apple making a major change to iTunes with version 12. So it's really a coincidence that the two came out so close together.
And they both involve audio of some kind.
And they're both audio related, yeah, because it's one of the topics that I cover an awful lot. It's something I know a fair amount about. I was actually very interested, just a quick thank you to Jeff Duncan, who did a technical edit on this book. I was very impressed with how much Jeff knows about the really finicky details of audio, because he's worked in recording studios and all that, which is something I never have. And you know, one of the things I enjoy about the work I do is when I have a long project and I can learn something while I'm doing it. And I learned a lot, not just about Audio Hijack, but about audio in general when I was working on this book.
That's a great lead-in. That's a great lead-in, because I think, first of all, the original Audio Hijack was an extremely powerful program, but it had a pretty steep learning curve, too. It was not intuitive to use.
No, the interface wasn't great. In fact, the interface was based on a sort of studio console concept. And you would have these little things you could add to a sort of a grid, and they looked like little dials, and it was really like a mixing board. And while that makes sense to people who do work in music studios, it doesn't make sense for the average user.
Yeah. The first time I picked up Audio Hijack, in fact, I ended up having to email Paul Kavassis and say, "Hey, this is what I'm trying to do. How do I do it?" And once you use it and get to understand, with that one, once you got to use it and understand it, it made a lot more sense.
It did. I've been using Audio Hijack, I think, since the very first version. And I mentioned in the book, I'm pretty sure I bought it to digitize some cassette tapes. From an old tape deck using a Griffin iMic. Do you remember that? It was like a little hockey puck. It had a USB cable coming out, and it had maybe two 1/8 inch plugs that you could put microphones in. And basically it was just a digitizer. So it would digitize the audio signal coming from your analog device and turn it into digital so that it could then work with, apps or anything else. And Audio Hijack was really easy to use for that simple process of simply capturing the audio. Now you fast forward to version 3, which is what we have now, and the guys at Rogue Amoeba just did an extraordinary job on the interface. I mean, they've taken a program that was arguably complicated because of its interface, and they've made it drag and drop simple. When I saw the first beta of this, I guess late last year, I was really impressed. I was blown away by it. This is how software should work.
And that's, I want to stop there for a second and make sure, folks, if you've used Audio Hijack in the past, this is not that Audio Hijack. The capabilities are there, but the interface is so much easier. You can now get things done easier, and you can also play a whole lot easier. And that's, Kirk, that's sort of where I wanted to start, is how do you suggest someone gets started with the new Audio Hijack? And I realize your book is the first place, but what kind of things...
You've got to buy my book.
Yeah. But what kind of things should they be starting with to find out what the capabilities are and start to climb that very, very, very shallow learning curve?
Well, one of the best things about the new Audio Hijack is there's something called a template chooser. Um, I'm looking at your eyes in Skype while we're doing this, but I also have Audio Hijack open here. It's got 10 sessions. A session is a combination of blocks, and I'll get to that term in a second. Combined, they record and process and save files for what you're working with. And the sessions are very aptly named. So we're doing this over video, but if we were just doing this in audio, we might want to choose the voice chat session, which records a Skype conversation. Now, podcasters use this. Journalists might use this for interviews, but you might also have some parents who are talking to their kids and they want to record their grandchildren speaking or something like that. So it's really the kind of thing that anyone could use. It's not just for professionals and that sort of thing. There's a web audio session, which is probably the one that's most commonly used. So you're in Safari and there's a streaming concert or something, and you want to capture the audio. And basically, it takes about 6 clicks to get there with Audio Hijack. You choose a session, you launch Safari, you start recording, and when it's over, you've got an audio file that you can import into your iTunes library.
And that, right there is the beauty, because you have a way to get started, whereas with the other Audio Hijack, you did not.
If I remember correctly, in the previous one, you had to choose your microphone or your input device or your application, and then you would choose how you wanted to record it. Then you wanted to choose how you would output it. But all of these were choices like in not a toolbar, but in an interface that didn't flow. So I mentioned the term blocks. Audio Hijack sessions are built around blocks. And a block is something like, I'm looking at the session that I used for my podcast, The Committed. I have 4 blocks. One is an input device block, and it's where you choose your microphone, or it's where you choose a similar block would be an application block. So that's your source. I have 2 blocks that most people won't need. I have a peak limiter, which you know what it is. It means that if all of a sudden I start talking too loud, it compresses the volume a little. I have VU meters, which show the levels. And then I have a recorder block. Now, you can do most recording sessions in Audio Hijack with just a source block and a recorder block. So the source, again, is your microphone, your application, and the recorder is where you tell Audio Hijack what type of file you want to use, AAC, MP3, Apple Lossless, or whatever, what quality, mono or stereo, and you have all sorts of other options in it. So each one of these blocks, you put them in a sort of a flow chart, and when you start recording, these little lights go on to show that the audio is going from one block to another, to another, to another. And the visual concept of a flow chart makes this so much easier to understand. Because it's a left to right order, and it just makes sense to have blocks. Later, if we talk about things like podcasts, I'll explain that you can even have blocks. You can have they call it an audio grid, and your audio grid can split into 2 sections to do 2 different things. And you could have a dozen blocks in it if you want to do something really powerful. But most people are never going to need more than 3. And most of the templates, the preset sessions are going to do what 95% of people want to do with this app.
And the idea that you can take the block you're talking about and drop new blocks in for the VU meters, for a peak limiter, for a special effect, and see it in the flow. You're right. I think that it makes so much sense, and it makes it not just easy to get things done, it makes it fun to play with.
It is fun. It's one of these things that, like, you drag a block and it pops up, and then you stick it in and everything moves around to connect to it. It's kind of cute the way it does that. It's so much less off-putting than a professional application. And again, I really congratulate them on this interface because it's really brilliant.
Okay, so that brings us to an interesting thing. First of all, while you can get great results out of this, it is not designed to be a professional application. On the other hand, there's no reason that you can't take what comes out of Audio Hijack and use it in a professional application if that's something that you want to do.
Sure. So what Audio Hijack does is it hijacks audio. And what that means is any audio that's playing in your Mac or on your system, um, it basically records it. It records a digital stream. So it's not like when I talked about digitizing a cassette tape back in the years, that was an analog stream coming in. If I were to connect a CD player to my Mac, since Macs don't have optical drives anymore, and I want to record a CD with Audio Hijack, as opposed to ripping it in iTunes, and there are some reasons you might want to do this, it doesn't convert this to analog and back to digital. It grabs the digital before it goes into your Mac's output. So the quality of what Audio Hijack records is as good as you can get on a Mac. It depends on your input, of course. If you're streaming something over the web, the sound quality is not the same as, say, CD quality. If an app is putting out audio, it's generally going to be the highest quality, but it'll depend on what the source is that app is processing. But Audio Hijack gives you the best possible quality. Lots of podcasters who don't use video like you use Audio Hijack for their podcasts. I know Jason Snell, the former head of Macworld, who does about 113 different podcasts. He uses Audio Hijack for all of them. And he made a small contribution in the book showing how he uses some of the features. And he is a professional podcaster. Audio Hijack for him is his tool of choice.
Yeah, and it was my tool of choice until I started doing video, and then it doesn't apply. Which takes us to another aspect of Audio Hijack. This is primarily for live recording use. It's not something where I'm going to, say, record the audio for this program and maybe drop it separately into Audio Hijack.
No, Audio Hijack is not an editor. It's a recording app, and it saves files in, as I said, a number of formats: MP3, AAC, Eighth Wave, Apple Lossless. You would then be editing it in something like, if you're a real pro, you'll be using Logic. If you're a less pro podcaster, you might use GarageBand. And if you really just want to trim and edit a file, Rogue Amoeba also makes an app called Fission, which is an audio editor. So it snips and slices and all that. And I even have a chapter on that app in the book because it's an ideal complement to Audio Hijack. If you're not a pro and you don't use these complicated pro tools or even GarageBand, Fission is a great way to cut off the introductions on a concert, to snip out commercials, things like that.
So we've mentioned podcasting a few times, and this also I want to make very clear to everyone that while this is absolutely a great tool for podcasters, it is not only for podcasters by any means. So before we go down the podcasting route, talk a little bit about some of the other things you might be able to do with Audio Hijack, stuff that people would maybe want to do.
Well, one really, really useful feature for Audio Hijack is if you have a vinyl record collection and you want to digitize your albums. Audio Hijack has a record player session, which not only is set up to grab the right input device and record it, but it comes with a number of filters. One is called declick, that removes those little clicks that you hear on vinyl. And, you know, that always makes me wonder, the people who think that vinyl sounds better than CD, they just don't remember those clicks. It's got a denoise filter, which removes different kinds of noise. It's got a dehum. That would be more for like digitizing cassette tapes where there's a power supply hum in them. So it's got a number of filters that are designed for digitizing analog audio like that. You may want to use it to record audio from a DVD. So let's say you've got a concert film on DVD. There are ways you can do this on a Mac. You could use about 3 different apps to sort of extract the audio, and it gets a little bit complicated. With Audio Hijack, you just play the DVD on your Mac, you start recording, and you've got your audio file at the end. Now, just to mention Fission again for both of these uses, Fission has a silence, I'm not sure the name, a silence detector, and you can adjust this and it will detect the silence between tracks. So if you've been recording LPs, you've got one file for side A and one file for side B. You dump them in Fission, it's going to find where to split the files so each one is a separate song. And this way you're going to have your individual files. The same thing would be the case for a concert video, though usually there's enough audience noise that there's not full silence. But after you finish hijacking the audio of your concert, all you do is you put it in an audio editor and you find the spots where you just put splits in for each song. Now, just to mention, there's always a gray area when it comes to things like recording audio from a DVD or ripping a DVD to put in iTunes and all that. Ripping DVDs isn't entirely legal, but it's not illegal. I'm in the UK where ripping CDs isn't even legal. They were legal, I think, from October last year until a few weeks ago, and then the law was overturned. So every time I rip a CD to put in my iTunes library, I'm breaking the law. But bear in mind that there are limitations to this sort of thing, and if you're really worried about it, you should check, laws in the States or in your country. But generally, if you own it, it's fine.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/MacVoices and use the code MacVoices when you place your order. I'm really excited to welcome back Casper as a sponsor of Mac Voices. That's because I own and sleep on a Casper mattress, and I sleep very well. The folks at Casper are a bit obsessive about their mattresses. Obsessive in their desire to deliver a high-quality mattress at a shockingly fair price. Shockingly? If you've been shopping for a mattress recently, shockingly is the word for it. Mattresses are expensive, really expensive. Casper delivers a twin-size mattress for only $500 and a king-size for only $950. Now that's shocking, but in a good way, and if you use the code MacVoices, you save $50 off that price. Oh, and that's the price. No surprise shipping charges, no surprise service fees. Of course, the real question is, how good is the mattress? How well does it suit you? Casper mattresses are a combination of latex foam and memory foam that give you just the right sink, just the right bounce. Yes, those are mattress technical terms, to give you the best night's sleep possible. And let's not forget how you buy a Casper mattress. Just go to casper.com/MacVoices, pick your size, and your Casper mattress arrives at your doorstep. No annoying salespeople, no laying down on a mattress in a showroom floor trying to figure out what the difference is between this mattress and that. Just go to casper.com/MacVoices to get an American-made Casper mattress that you can try free for a full 100 days. In the unlikely event that it doesn't suit you, they have a painless return process. But believe me, after a week on a Casper, you're not about to return it. You're wondering if a Casper mattress can really be that good, right? There's only one way to find out. Right now, go to casper.com/MacVoices, pick the size mattress you need, and use the coupon code MacVoices to get $50 off their already amazing price. You're in for the best night's sleep you've had in a long time. That's casper.com/MacVoices to check them out, and the coupon code MacVoices to get $50 off your choice of a high-quality, American-made twin, queen, or king mattress. Welcome back, and thanks to Casper for their support of Mac Voices. I love the examples you gave. You went from something that was very much analog, recording LPs, to very much digital, playing a concert film on DVD and capturing that audio. And that just points to the versatility of this tool and how well thought out it is, and how many times someone has actually sat down and said, how will people use this?
Yeah. I use it a lot for recording on the web. So over here, the BBC runs a series of classical concerts that they call the proms. And I think there's about 60 or 70 concerts in Royal Albert Hall. You can watch them all on the web. They're all filmed. You can listen to them on what's called the iPlayer, which is the BBC. They call it the catch-up service. So you can go back a couple weeks. And I don't always have time to listen to the ones that I want. So I just record them on the web with Audio Hijack, save them in my iTunes library, and when I have time, I'll listen to them. I mean, there's one every evening for 2 months of summer, so that's a lot of stuff to catch up on. One example in the book is I'm a Shakespeare buff, and the BBC does productions of Shakespeare plays on the radio. And again, I'm not going to sit down for 2.5 hours and listen to it when it's on live. That's not going to work. So just when I was starting the book, they were doing a production of Macbeth, and I said, well, perfect time to use this as an example in the book. And so I set a schedule. So Audio Hijack would start up at the right time, and it started playing, and I recorded it, and it's in my iTunes library, and I still haven't listened to it, but we'll get to that.
As long as you have it.
Yeah. Well, you can end up with too many, right? If I recorded all of these concerts in the summer, that's really a lot of concerts. But it's a way to keep things that you'd like. There are things that stream live on the internet that you might not be able to catch, or that you might not have the time to watch till the end or something. Just turn on Audio Hijack and you've got the audio, whether it's on YouTube, in a dedicated app like iTunes. Audio Hijack can capture audio from any app running on your Mac. It can capture audio from any input device, which is a microphone, a mixer, something like the Griffin iMic. Anything that brings audio into your Mac that shows up in the sound preference pane of system preferences, Audio Hijack can capture.
We all seem to be, well, in a lot of cases, we're moving to a convenience-oriented society, and sometimes things might be broadcast, as you said, that I don't have time to listen to right then, or it's not convenient. But this is a great way to time shift them, and then as you said, move them maybe to an audio-only version that there may be video associated with it, but again, you don't have time or it's not convenient, so you can at least get the audio portion of it. It's a great tool.
You said two interesting words there, time shift. Audio Hijack has a block, which is called time shift, and what this does is, let's give an example. You've got a subscription to, what is it, MLB Plus, the thing where you can stream baseball games over the web, and you're listening to your favorite team playing their game, and the phone rings. Well, if you've got Audio Hijack running, all you need to do is start recording, and I'll put recording in air quotes, and add the time shift block and click pause. What Audio Hijack does, it's going to keep recording into a buffer all the stuff that you miss, and then when your phone calls over, you click play again, and you listen from where you stopped before. So it's going to keep recording. Let's say you're on the phone for 5 minutes. You'll keep listening 5 minutes behind what's live, and you won't miss any part of the game.
I didn't know about that feature. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's something they added. I think they just added in an update a few weeks ago.
You mentioned, Kirk, that you like to, when you're writing these books, you like to learn things. What did you learn? I mean, because you're an audio guy. I'm a little surprised that you would learn anything writing this book other than just how to use Audio Hijack to best effect. What kind of things did you discover?
You'd be surprised how many details there are when talking about audio. Audio Hijack can detect silence, and it can stop recording when there's silence. Now, as you probably know, there are two kinds of silence. There's silence, which means there's no sound being output, and there's silence, which means there's a sound of zero being output, right? And Audio Hijack knows how to detect the difference. And Jeff Duncan and I had a very long discussion about this. He was basically explaining to me what the difference is and why it's important in certain cases. It's not something that most people need to worry about with Audio Hijack. But there were also some issues involving mixers that were very interesting to learn about. I've never worked with a mixer. Some podcasters do. If you've got multiple people, you'll have their microphones coming into a mixer, and you'll mix them to have a single stream coming into your computer. It's not something that I'm familiar with. So it was interesting to learn about some of the issues with mixers. We were discussing high-resolution audio a bit. There is a small subset of people who think that music at a quality better than that of CD sounds better than CDs. Some of us disagree, and that's a subject for another show. But there were some interesting discussions about how Audio Hijack handles high-resolution audio. Basically, it can record the high-resolution audio at whatever resolution your Mac can record. But again, this isn't the kind of issue that most people need to worry about. This is the audio geek or audiophile stuff.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up because when we mentioned YouTube, I wanted to go back to that. So what is Audio Hijack capturing? It is capturing the digital stream. So
It's
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 as high
it's
as the original source.
yeah, within limits. Generally, I mean, there are some types of audio that the Mac can't reproduce without special hardware or drivers and all that. If you remember Super Audio CDs or SACDs, they're at a much higher quality level than even high resolution audio. Macs can't handle that natively, so it would be downsampled to a lower quality. Um, but again, 99% of people don't need to worry about that. Audio Hijack captures exactly what's being broadcast, streamed, played, no matter how you do it. If you play a CD through iTunes, it's full CD quality, and Audio Hijack captures that. But of course, you can have Audio Hijack capture it at a lower bit rate as well. If you're recording a baseball game, you don't need to be recording at full CD quality, and you probably don't even need stereo. It also depends on what you're going to do with the files afterwards. If it's music that you want to listen to in your iTunes library, then you want something like 256K AAC, which is the format the iTunes store uses. But if you're recording spoken word, for example, so my Shakespeare play, I record at a lower bit rate. It takes up less space on disk.
Okay, that's obvious to those of
Yeah,
us that
and I have a
record audio.
discussion of this in the book. There's a short chapter with some basically some audio concepts where I explain the different file formats, bit rates, and sample rates, and again, things most people don't need to worry about, but things that these are choices you have in Audio Hijack, and a lot of users won't know what these choices are. So we did put a chapter in explaining a lot of this stuff.
Today's edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by TunnelBear, the really simple app to browse privately and get around blocked websites. Find out more and download your very own TunnelBear at tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. We're living in a world where Wi-Fi is everywhere to keep us connected everywhere. The only problem with that is that we're not always sure who we're connected to, or who might be watching what we're looking at or talking about. I don't want to sound paranoid, but there are real dangers out there, especially when you're traveling or away from home and need to surf from the hotel room or the coffee shop or even the airport. That's where TunnelBear comes in. TunnelBear is an easy-to-use VPN, or virtual private network, that secures and encrypts your internet connection on your Mac, iPhone, or iPad, so that ISPs, governments, and companies can't monitor what you're seeing, saying, or doing. You can appear to be surfing from a different country if you wish, so that censorship restrictions or blocked websites become accessible, or from your home country if that isn't your issue. Try the free tier of TunnelBear right now by visiting tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. While you're there, be sure to check out their plain English privacy policy. Not a lot of legalese that makes you wonder what they really mean. Unlike some services we could name, TunnelBear's privacy policy is as easy to understand as their service is to use. TunnelBear gives you all the privacy and security of a VPN without any of the setup and maintenance hassles. One-click security, and I do mean one-click security, is waiting for you now at tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. Go get it and surf securely. Thanks to TunnelBear for their support of Mac Voices. Kirk, any particular features or anything that you were sort of surprised to find in here? Because I guess I'm a little biased. I would expect you to be a little biased since you had used the older version of Audio Hijack for so long. Anything that is like, wow, this is new, this is cool, or this is unexpected?
Well, I'd say the most interesting is the way that they've reconfigured the interface. And again, the template chooser that has all these sessions that let you do things without having to choose the blocks yourself. Probably the two sessions that I had never thought of using, one's called increase volume and the other was called sweeten. And so I was thinking, why would I want to increase the volume on my Mac? And then Paul Kafassa said to me, does it all the time when he's on an airplane and he's got his MacBook or MacBook Pro or whatever, and he's watching a movie, and the noise in an airplane, you want to pump the volume up to 12 or something instead of 10. So Audio Hijack can do that. It takes the audio and it puts it through It doesn't technically amplify it, but it amplifies it in a software way, and it makes it a little bit louder. The Sweeten program is interesting because you can use it to apply equalization. You can use it to increase bass and treble or decrease bass and treble. Now, I have my iMac connected to an actual stereo. I mean, a standalone amplifier, speakers that are this tall. I don't use little computer speakers on my desk. But if you are using smaller speakers, you might want to just even play iTunes, use Audio Hijack with the Sweeten session to adjust the sound to make it more appropriate for the type of speakers that you're using.
Yep, you're right. I would not have thought of using it in that fashion because you can turn it on, not necessarily have to be recording.
Right. So Audio Hijack is designed to record, but you don't need a recorder block if all you want to do is process audio. And again, so the increased volume in the Sweeten sessions do that. They let you apply a number of effects. I mean, you're not going to want to put reverb on something you're playing back, but there's a balance, there's an equalizer, there's bass and treble, there's a mono enhancer. Now, this is something I disagree with. I think in a previous show we talked about how much I like listening to mono recordings. Back in the days, sort of the early stereo days, when the engineers had really perfectioned the way of placing microphones to make mono recordings, and the stereo mixes came after. The mono enhancer here is for people who don't like mono recordings that, I've got these two speakers, and if I'm listening to a mono recording, it sounds like it's coming from here. The mono enhancer sort of expands the soundstage a little. It doesn't make it stereo, but it gives it more space. So if you don't like the sound of mono recordings, you can use that block to change the sort of ambience of the mono recording. But I don't like it. It's not authentic.
In case we just left some people in the dust here, I tend to think of Audio Hijack as a recording thing, and I think that's because I was using it for podcasting. But it really is a processor, so you can play with a lot of this stuff without having to record it or having a need to record it if you just want to mess with it and see what you can get out the other end. For as you said, Paul's example on a plane is perfect. Just amplify the volume a little bit. So yeah. This is a utility that has a lot of different uses, and frankly, you just pointed out one I'd never thought about.
Yeah. I'll give you another one you probably hadn't thought about. Sometimes you might have a video and you're playing it on your Mac, and the sound isn't quite synchronized with the lips. I actually just ripped a DVD I got today, an old film of King Lear by a Russian director. And when I looked at the DVD, I could see immediately that it's just off by a hair, 10 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, I don't know exactly. So if you're watching that video on your Mac, you can use Audio Hijack with the sync block to make a very, very precise change in the delay of the audio. So basically, if you consider there's two streams, I'm trying to get this right for the camera, consider there's two streams, your video stream is here and your audio stream is a little bit behind it. And Audio Hijack basically moves the audio stream up or back to get it in sync with the video stream. I find it really annoying when I'm watching a video and it's out of sync. Now, I have an audio video receiver in my living room, and it has a setting for this. And most AV receivers do. And I'm not sure how many milliseconds it is. Maybe it's in increments of 50 milliseconds. But the audio and the video often go at different speeds depending on how they're processed, if you're going through HDMI. So I know that I've set in mine, I've changed the delay one way or another. So when I'm playing a DVD through my receiver, the audio is synced slightly different to compensate for that. Now, that sounds like a pretty geeky feature of Audio Hijack. You're probably not going to buy the app for that. But if you buy it for some of the other things, it's one of these features it's nice to know is there, because one day you might be looking at a video and thinking, wow, this doesn't look right. Hey, I've got this app that can fix it. Yeah, and since you can stream audio and video with AirPlay from a Mac, Audio Hijack can correct the sync on the video, and then you can stream it to an Apple TV, which is connected to your TV set. So you don't even have to be watching that video on a Mac.
This is why you need to Kirk's book, folks, because just when you think you know everything that you need to know about Audio Hijack, he's going to tell you 4 or 5 things you don't know that will be really useful now or later. Kirk, let's talk about the specifics of the book. It's obviously available from TakeControlBooks.com. What kind of pricing is it?
It's $10, which is cheap at twice the price kind of price. When is this show going to go live? Because we're currently having a 50% off sale.
I definitely wanted to make sure we mentioned that. I'm going to get this out as quick as possible. So, folks, if you're seeing this, well, it's no frame of reference, but go and visit Take Control.
The sale goes through the 24th of August.
Oh, great. Okay, so
and it's 50% off all Take Control books, including this, my iTunes book, and all the great books by Joe Kissel and Glenn Fleischman and all the other Take Control authors.
Great. So I'm going to get this out as quickly as I possibly can to make sure that if you listen to it promptly, you can save yourself 50% on Kirk's book and on, as he said, all the others. But yeah, that's a pretty reasonable price. And I've said it so many times before, but I look at these books as being able to hire an expert to write tutorials for me that will get me up and running with this stuff. And that's a pretty cheap price on a per hour basis.
Yeah. I wish, it's a market-driven thing. I wish we could sell them for $20.
Sure.
But would I pay $20? It's 119 pages. It's not a short book. Would I pay $20 for it? It's tough. People will go out and they'll buy a DVD or a Blu-ray now for $20 without even thinking twice. Whereas a piece of reference material, they'll be really finicky about paying more than $10 for it. So, but that's another story.
Well, and I think a lot of folks think that, well, I can figure it out. I'm going to get the documentation and I can do it. And it's the Take Control authors approach things so much differently because they want to get you up and running. They want to give you examples, as Kirk has done here, of what kind of things you can do with it instead of just leaving you on your own. You point back to the old days of the software companies providing all of their own documentation. Some were very good at it, some were horrible at it. And I think that was directly attributable to the success or failure of a lot of software, because people don't want to look at a manual that thick. I mean,
well, you and I both read some of those manuals back in the day, and probably read some cover to cover, or at least leafed through them to look at every heading to see. Because one of the things about a big manual is you can see what the program can do, even if you don't understand it yet. So I mentioned a couple features that you weren't aware of in Audio Hijack, and that's the kind of thing you see in a manual when you go through and you flip through the pages. Now, we kind of overdid it with those 1,000-page computer books, and I'm guilty because I did a number of them. But this was before the internet, when you couldn't Google something when you didn't know how to, change something in the Mac, and it was very helpful to have a reference book. Times have changed, and so this is why, Take Control is a very good example of how we're focusing more on a task-based methodology than something exhaustive. In my iTunes book, which we talked about last time, we used a question and answer format. It's the only Take Control book that does that, because iTunes actually lends itself to that. In this one, I start with an explanation of how I make a recording from the first step to the last. And then I go back through the different things that I've discussed in that chapter to explain to people more about, here's what a source block is, here are your options and all. So I basically started with a project that I was doing, said, here's what the project does, and then as you continue in the book, you get the background information. So yeah, our goal is to make these things a lot more palatable to users. You couldn't write 1,000 pages about Audio Hijack, or you could, but I wouldn't recommend it. You could go into an awful lot of detail about audio formats and all that, but most people don't need it.
No, and another thing that's happened, I think, is that the designs of software and interfaces has evolved so that there isn't quite as much explanation needed because it's not quite so esoteric. And so those where you needed 1,000 pages to explain what all these commands were, now we have much more visually oriented interfaces, and it's more about actually getting things done rather than trying to figure out what button to push or what thing to drag where to get it done.
Yeah, well, this is the case for smaller apps. I'd say sort of, maybe it's not the right term, single-purpose apps. But if you look at something like Pages or Numbers, you've seen the Take Control books on those apps. They don't cover everything in Pages or Numbers. Michael Cohen's Pages book is wonderful, and he has to cover Pages on the Mac and on iOS, and he doesn't really. It's not exhaustive in any way. You look at Microsoft Office and forget about it. You'd still need 1,000-page manuals to describe Microsoft Word or Excel or PowerPoint.
Yeah,
even
good
today.
point.
But it's true that single-purpose apps that have a limited functionality, if they have a good interface, they don't need a lot of documentation. It's helpful. So I think the advantage, so I'm tooting my horn here, I think the advantage of this Take Control book is that while there is documentation with Audio Hijack, my approach is more project-based and showing the real-world examples of what you can do rather than the help in Audio Hijack, which is, well, this is what this does. And I think that's one of the advantages that we have with Take Control books is that we're not required to write exhaustive documentation. So we can take that approach. A couple of years ago, we talked about my Scrivener book, and the Scrivener book was built around the mythical me writing a book called Moby Dick. And I started out one chapter at a time, and I showed how you build up. And that's the way most users approach software. They've got a project, they've got an idea, and they want to know how to do it from the beginning to the end. They don't want to read one chapter on the Microsoft Word toolbar before they get to the chapter about printing. They want to type and print or type and save as a PDF or whatever. So, we've got this advantage that we can, that we're all thinking more about users and what the user's going to do. And obviously, all of the Take Control books are written by people who use the software. I use iTunes like crazy. As I said, I've used Audio Hijack since it was first released. I use Scrivener. I use LaunchBar. So, you've got the advantage for this $10 book or $5 because it's on sale now while quantities last. You've got the advantage that the authors are all people who work with the software.
So the book is $10. It is Take Control of Audio Hijack. TakeControlBooks.com is where you want to go to get it.
Yep.
Kirk, thank you. Thank you for writing the book and taking that project approach, because I think you're right. There's no better way to learn a piece of software than to do a project. And taking a Take Control book and going through the projects, you just learn things that much faster, so you can discover other things. We'll have you back again soon, whether it's to discuss music or audio.
No more books coming out in the very near future.
Darn. Okay, well, that's okay.
Well, there may be an update to the iTunes book because, we have 10.11 and iOS 9 coming out soon. But I don't think Apple's going to make any major changes to iTunes.
Maybe we'll have you back, though, just to talk about iTunes in general, because there's a lot to be said about that.
There is. It's endless.
When you're not writing books for whoever or whatever, where else can folks find you? I want to make sure we get that in.
Yeah, so my website is called Kirkville. It's at McElhearn.com. That's McElhearn.com. You can also find a link there to my iTunes forum, which I set up in July, and which has been quite active. So if you have questions about iTunes, stop by and drop off your questions. And you can find me at Macworld, where I've been writing a lot lately, including my Ask the iTunes Guy column, which is every 2 weeks.
Perfect. Good to see you, as always.
Likewise, Chuck. Thanks for inviting me again.
We'll do it again. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. We continue our coverage of Take Control books along with everything that happens in the Apple universe. We hope you'll come along for the ride. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices Magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.